Jumbo, Jumbo, Deji, Shebo, Rajumba, Yandabo, Zobe, Sanje, Rebo, Don, Shazu, Devora, Shebo, Jide, Jembo, Jibu, Due, Kalu, Jibu, Lana, Nebo, Tata, Bina, Jumbo, Sanje, Jonden, De, Bejewo, Shaja, Tubo, Lo, Chaze, Chedu, Jazu, Jeho, Jumbo, Jonden, De, Shi, Shebo, Rajumba, Yandabo, Zobe, Sanje, Rebo, Don, Shazu, Demo, Devora, Jidin jemba gewe duwe kalu jiru lana meba lana menam gen damba sanje jonde debe jewa shagya tuba la chazalo chudu jazu de damba jonde de deshin sheba raj yanda mondo be sanje reba da shazu dembara deware shaba jidin jemba jewu duwe kalu jiru lana meba lana menam gen damba sanje jonde Jewa shagya tuba la chazalo chudu jazu Kani soho judanze sajen de la gomba de murde Kani jiden de na choje zon de ze kiba chula chase Namda ho chodu zuzan wa isi gatsu sigi humbo Taba jidin suna lame wa gombo chuni chula chase Tenjo tembo teme dave sha sedo trawa kyola cha telo. Tunra kyodra sipa suma ji nyame kinyi kyola cha telo. Ugo tuji chidemba tamche kempe tamba go. Sona yende gyatso je deshi chila cha telo. Labe deja trewa gyuru kewe nyesun le shoishin. Chidu dana chagirwa shigyu chala cha Chone trove lamyo de labo dala Shigye damba yenden den Gindu laya cha Deba tiyam meja shin Gyewa pursun tobarge Range sene yonsundu Dene sange dembayin Karma rabri marmedan Yuma sepa shuvurdan Milan lodan chidavu Dişi çönan tarda Çönan di tanci sipahi Kopan tüne genge ratede Kadanadan şive lapçuve Sibe çolen rovan rovare To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the full destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, and the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, the supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you, who are wise then, I prostrate. With pure bodies, formed supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, Lord, to you I prostrate. With the supreme signs, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. You are immaculate, 3 worlds are not. Incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior having great compassion, the Founder having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean. To you, the one God, the thusness I prostrate. The purity which makes one free from attachment, the virtue which frees one from the lower realms, the one path, the sublime pure reality, to that dharma which pacifies I prostrate. Those who are liberated and who also show the path of liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you, the sublime community intending virtue, I prostrate. Be delivered from samsara ocean, protected by waves of aging, sickness, and death. Sumla Jar Zelum Dage Hubun Dujina Jumden de Gilbert Chago Bumbore Longa Longa Gende Jimbodan Janju Sinde Gende Jimbodan Tajitu Jide Jumden de Samonan Washi Javi Shigi Namran Getting Zilan Yogar Suya Deze Janju Simba Simba Jumbo Papa Chinese Wanju Shira Givara Jimba Samo Jiboni Number Daji Bumbo Mabo de Dalaya Ranjigi Tombar Number Sange Gate Zedam Demba Sharibu Janju Simba Simba Jumbo Baba Chinese Wanchula Tige Chimeso Rijibu Kalala Shiragi Varu de Jimba Samu Cheba Chuba Tuba de Jitar Labarja Tige Chimebadan Janju Simba Simba Jumbo Baba Chinese Wanchugi Zedam Demba Sharida Dibula Tige Chimeso Sharibu Rijibu Mukanla Shiragi Varu de Jimba Samu Cheba Chuba Tuba de Jitar Number Tower Shade Pumbo Mabo de Dalaya Ranjigi Tombar Number Zodongbao Dombani Susu Zule Dombani Shemayin Dombani Lehian Sushemayin Dejindu Sorwadan Dejedan Number Shibanam Dombao Sharibu Dedar Shetampe Dombani de Sini Meba Mageba Magaba Chima Meba Chimadan Rewa Kawa Meba Sharibu Dedawena Dombani Sume Sorwame Deshime Deshime Number Sheba me, Mime, Nawame, Name, Chime, Lume, Yime, Lume, Rame, Jime, Rume, Rejame, Jomedo, Vije, Kame, Nebane, Ige, Kame, Ige, Number Shebe, Kange, Bardo, Yamedo, Mariba me, Mariba Seba me, Kashime, Kashi Sebe, Bado, Yamedo, Dejendo, Donwa, Gobadan, Lame, Yeshime, Dobame, Madoba, Yamedo, Jare. Ganja Simba Nam Toba Mebe Chiri Shiragi Parudu Chimba La Tenzin Nete Simla Deba Mejin Jaba Mete Chinchi Lole Shinde Dene Nyangele Debe Kara Chindu Tuzundu Nambru Shube Sange Damji Shiragi Parudu Chimba La Tene Lana Meba Yanda Zobe Sanjudu Ngambara Zobare Sange So Deda Wena Shiragi Parudu Chimbenga Riba Chimbenga Lana Mebenga Minyamba Danyambenga Donga Najera de Shivar Shibenga Mizubana Demba Shiva Chate Shiragi Parudu Chimbenga Meba Taya Gande Gande Para Gade Para Sanga Dembodi So Jarimbu Jonju Sambana Teta Shirabji Parudu Chimba Samola Lapar Jawo Dine Chomden de Tingen de Dele Shindu Jonju Samba Samba Jumbo Baba Shinres Wanchula Lexo Shejawa Jine Lexo Lexo Ikibu Dede Shino Dede Shinde Jidar Kyugi Jimba Shindu Shiragi Parudu Jimba Amulo Jibra Jade Deshin Shaba Namjan Jese Yirango Chomden Dege Dege Cheka Sene Sedan Demba Sharida Debo Danjanju Samba Samba Jumbo Baba Shinres Wanchu Nandembe Kore de Dadan Dadan Midan Hama Yindan Lisa Jibe Dede Yiran De Chomden Dege Sumba Langa Peretu Thus I have heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha and vultures speak, together with a great assembly of monks and bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One was totally absorbed in the concentration that examines all phenomena, called profound illumination. And at the same time, the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, was engaged in the profound practice of the wisdom gone beyond, analyzing the five aggregates by nature empty. Then, through the inspiration of the Vata, the Venerable Shariputra spoke to the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, how should those of good family learn who wish to follow the profound practice of the wisdom gone beyond? Thus he spoke, and the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, replied to the Venerable Shariputra, saying, O Shariputra, whatever son or daughter of good family wishes to follow the profound practice of the wisdom gone beyond, should look at it like this, analyzing the five aggregates by nature empty. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is no other than form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, recognition, reclamations, and consciousness are all empty.
They are rewarded.
No tongue, no body, no mind. There are no spheres of the eyes, up to no spheres of the mind. There are none of these all the way up to the sphere of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance, nor is there destruction of ignorance. There are none of these all the way up to, there is no old age and death, nor is there destruction of old age and death. Thus there is no suffering, no cause of suffering, no cessation of suffering, and no path. There is no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, because there is no attainment, all bodhisattvas hold to the wisdom gone beyond. And because there is no obscurity of mind, they have no fear. Passing utterly beyond falsity, they reach beyond the bounds of sorrow. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times by relying on the wisdom gone beyond, fully and clearly awakened to unsurpassed, most perfect and complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the wisdom gone beyond, the mantra of great insight, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as the truth, for there is no deception. The mantra of the wisdom gone beyond is proclaimed. But this is how a bodhisattva mahasattva should learn the profound wisdom gone beyond. Then the Blessed One arose from that concentration and praised the noble Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva mahasattva, saying, very good, O son of good family, it is exactly like that. The profound wisdom gone beyond should be practiced exactly as you have said, and then the Tathagata will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, the Venerable Shariputra, the noble Avalokiteshvara, that whole gathering in the world with its gods, men, anti-gods, and spirits, their hearts full of joy, praise the words of the Blessed One. So ends the noble discourse on the essence of the wisdom of God.
다들 먼저 사님아, 니는 좀 어떻게 진짜 사디데 지난 다 디나다 또 로젠도 데 저는 좀 남림 첨보. 또 디버 첨보고 최 냠들랭게 파르도고 최대 장주 디버 첨보 최. 안에 대 원로고 다 원로에 디버 기부 중모도 남들이 맞서 로장고 이거 인디 디게 바데 차단 시에고 요래서 뭐지.
Today is Sunday, and we resume what is an ongoing introduction into the Dharma. The specific lesson of Sunday is drawn from the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. Of the Dharmas, the Mahayana Dharma. The Mahayana Dharma has for itself all the preliminary steps found in the foundation vehicle. And so the foundation vehicle steps too are critical to study.
이제 진짜 이제 이거보다 먼저 가진 거만 남리 거만 시험도 잡았다. 한번도 같이 통화 최대기 뭐저지 아니 되네 최대 뭐저지잖아요. 굴롱 최주. 다만도 굴롱 최주지. 아니 되네 마체네. 굴롱 최주시는 최년수 최시주. 아니 되네다 장주 남지를 봐. 로무시 장와로 좋아다. 무시 아니 죽생 저 람림 아니 냠스는 죽이 아니 좀 어떻게 시기 어려서
In the beginning, as one starts out in the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, the beginning is the very introduction to the Dharma. And when the introduction to it is made, then one refines one's intention. And then moving forward, then one examines how one listens and how one provides instruction in the Dharma. And then one moves into the actual meditations that are organized into preliminary meditations, the actual meditation, and the conclusion. This is the fashion of a progression through the great treatise.
Oh, yeah, 이제 이리도 마다나 간다 배당 아주 지dengi 저 친구지 고수고 유배이나 아니면 너무 착시도 야고 걸어 착시도 착시 야고면은 아니 무시도 야고 연구 말아서 착시 야고도 대나신 거랑도 다 남지 로 장도 잠바 고마 착시기 저 꽤 착시도 자와디 아니 꿀롱데 시라 개침부 자기 열었잖아. 통보 꿀롱 주주 시기 열어서.
And just as in any ordinary worldly project, the project will naturally begin with its plan. Without any plan, there's nothing to realize in the project. So too, then in training in stages of the path, these trainings depend upon the preceding plan, which is the very refinement of the mental intention.
세상다 강가르 최 랑기 제바도 최도 들어와다. 대한 택받침비 최도 들어만도 세디 아니 상마 꿀롱기 돈을 쏘고래 해서.
And so it is in any activity, whether that activity will become a dharma, and especially a Mahayana dharma, depends upon the refined intention.
어떤데 이거마다 통마 꿀롱 주주지. 아니 꿀롱 주차는 아니 다 최니시 지당지. 아니 니시 제차는 당마도 전주고 생무시 정원로 뭐 좋아. 아니 저의 최초 가슴은 다 셰대야 저의 최초. 아니 무시 장주고 셈 공부. 아니 장주고 셈 공사는 대공원도 줘야 산지 주고 공원도 제거야. 어떻게 다 주베를 받게 되더라요 손으로.
Then first the refinement of the mental intention, followed by the examination of how to listen and how to provide instruction in the dharma. When this is completed, then the progression into meditations in bodhicitta, which depend upon preliminary rites, so are concerned with the 6 preliminary rites. When these are concluded, then one moves into the actual meditation upon bodhicitta, and then one progresses finally to the realization of the state of Buddhahood. This is the progression.
나 그냥 원도 저외주 원도 장주고 셈 귤라 깨버 제발로 원도 저외주 죽이 차르네 땅안도 아니 나 원도 저외 무시 장주고 셈 공부 제발로 땅안도 셈 장주고 셈 귤라 마제버 깨버 코노고 페어 지고고요 이 제발 제외 시도라 통보 아도 로 장고고요 로 정야 지도라 아니 남지를 받게 돼 시작금 지야 돼 아니 계속 못 차게 어려서
The 6 preliminary rites are to develop the mind of awakening in the mind where it hasn't yet arisen. And when it does arise, then one moves into the actual meditations in bodhicitta, producing the mind of awakening, sustaining the mind of awakening, and intensifying the mind of awakening. But for all of this to occur, the intensification of the mind of awakening, for that to occur, one must engage in a thought transformation. And in order for there to be a thought transformation, there must be a review of the meditations involved. Thus the importance of a review meditation.
다 시작금 제스도 막 변하면 변되죠. 원한도 내가 처시 소다 침모도 있나다 내가 처시 가르된 거 있나 가지고 내가 통화 처시 된게 처시 된게 아니 내가 제차와 이게 가지고 맞이버진 참바진 내가 제차와 되게 되라 아니 야고 총도에 미도에 야고 맞으나 아니 고 연주서 주제 야고 총도는 열제다야 이치그래 다 단달 내가 제 심바대야 간대도 따기로 와 야고 주면 마음을 가르치고서래 제가 내가 가르치고서래 지난 가리 약사를 아무도 셈나로 방아지 반되기도 와 대나신 배대나신 만한저 람님 내지도 다 람권에 고신이 되는 지는 막에 죽죽 밀로베 송죽이 바르게 남지를 받게 아니 아기 배나신 이제 냠내 셈에 셔러치야 챔베가 맞제버지 람귤 장심버도 맞제버 챔베야 루들랑 한다 제심버도 많이 뭐 권권도 펴와지 마음벌 람귤에 깨고야 되겠다 셈에 요도 깨와지 되겠네 셔럼 제고야 레스마스
And in a review meditation, that is no different from the planning involved in a new project. If it is the founding of a factory, whatever the case may be, no different from that. There is a plan in the beginning, and then the execution of the plan. And as one goes forward, one will look to see how one is following the original plan, whether execution is consistent with what was planned, how improvements might be made, seeing how things are developing, examining what is ongoing and anticipating what might follow, how the plan may play out. All of this which goes on in any worldly consideration of any sort of project goes on to in the stages of the path to enlightenment, which begins in guru devotion, reliance upon the spiritual mentor, and continues onward and through the achievement of the path of union. Along the way, that all the practices are consistent with the texts, the scriptural sources, that they arise in the mind as they ought to. Those that have arisen, that they are sustained, preserved, and refined. All in all, that the causes for the ultimate result are produced as quickly as possible. The value of the review meditation.
예, 다시 저금 제스들 내가 제사를 내 가지고 삼로 땅에 도와 뒤나지 전에 아주 다 계산 시에 선배가 람 신이 되지 치워입니다. 뭐 대조 되지니가 이게 되마 방 제사를 맞지 버치는 참배유도 샬 아니냐면 지고 거래. 다 단단 아주 시에 고야 뭐 시에 그다 레 이거 중국을 남긴 나네. 아니 다 말아서 직 규다 제보고 남샤. 아니 직 레 규대가 남샤 되게디 예버도 당아서 최라는 제라 매도 매로 이게 대한선마자 아니 마음발라 장원 규백의 창조를 선마 써봐 아니 닝제다 신백의 창조를 선다 대도에 아 샤곰도 우지 바한테 선마 공국이 어려서
Activities that have been completed too may be recalled and reflected upon. We have considered guru devotion, the reliance upon the spiritual mentor, impermanence, imminent death, the preciousness of the human rebirth, and its great significance, all of these in their prescribed order, and we may recall them again. And now our present topic is the topic of the Dharma of lesser scope, the fundamental presentation of karmic causality. In any practice of the Dharma, this karmic causality is indispensable, the understanding of it indispensable to Dharma practice, and it must be integrated into one's mind. And so then this will proceed all the way to bodhicitta and the altruistic intent in this series of meditations.
예, 남 똑바 유도 계획치도 당기 줄라 장주고 셈. 다 줄라 계고요. 이 유도 계획치도라 아니 신이 되죠. 똑바도 매매로 인도 거냐면 제고고 대 냠내 제고고. 다 제바 대야 아니 배최 제바데 제마다 제루치 남바체는 제는 되기요 말. 단단히 제고요. 이 제고배 텐데기 치도라 이 치워입니다. 뭐 냠내 되게 제고요. 다 제베 뉴바 아니 랑라 여바다 랑라 최대 제투야 여바다 제투의 여바다 제국의 여배 균생의 차네 아니 대조 되지 얘가 야 다 최대 랑랜데 칸데스 제국의 여바 셰베체네 아니 레주제가 남샤 어디 봐도라 기부 충국의 남지를 마시기 열어서
타마 데라 레기움데 장고베 김선
레 랑레 최최기 랑게 랑레 칸데스 따르고 여배 셰베치도라 레주제 남샤 어디 셰베치도라 아니 단 기부 충국의 남샤데 장고고 열어서
so that realizations arise rapidly in one's meditations, so that the mind of awakening is developed in one's mind. This sequence, beginning with guru devotion, the reliance upon the spiritual mentor, and then in the implementation of the Dharma, that there be no delay in it, that one begins right away, one considers imminent death and momentariness. And then so that one recognizes one's power, one's own capability, one's own potential for success in the Dharma, one meditates upon the precious human rebirth and its great significance. And then so that there is in implementation of the Dharma, in its practice and efficacy, one considers karmic causality, these topics of the Dharma of lesser scope.
빠트네 저 가르치는 최고래스. 다 좋아들 가르치는 최고래스. 제나 가르요래스 좋아들리고. 제자다 맞아 밀라 미지 버전에 지단 셈지 임베찬에 맞을 동에 하신기 요래. 그래서 레사사레 레사버제다 레딜게 미게와 사요래. 미게와 사오기 깽기 맞을 되고 동에 요래. 예, 제가 대부 동에 되게 봤세고 빵고 빠야게 된다다. 최선데.
What is the purpose to the Dharma? And when one practices the Dharma, what follows? We as human beings, one among sentient beings, our experience is necessarily one of pain, and it is so by the force of accumulated karmas, particularly the force of accumulated non-virtuous karmas, which have as their necessary consequence pain as their result. These karmas and klesha then must be abandoned, and this is the underlying purpose to the Dharma.
이게 동해들이야 다체 되게 동해다 세침에 동해 니 맞춰오래. 이스 네 세들이야 다 제가 나지기 동해 요티 나네 다 미세 디원도 제바이나 먼저 동해 최쇼되다 치외 동해 들어와. 어디서나 치외 동해 레버가도라 안돌라 찍르르 나다메 셈나 안라메베 돈 치와 흘르지 중도야. 그거직들이. 다 등에 배 최쇼되 가래서나 세치마 세침에 동해들에 다 세침에 동해들어야 다 개체쇼되 아니 라기 여월내서데 야보질는 거야. 그냥 송도 맞게 된돌에 깨야 어디치도라 당만수 최치고 그래서
There is pain in this life and pain in lives to come. Make two of the sorts of pain one will experience, the pain in this life and then again pain in subsequent lives. These are the pains of birth, aging, sickness, and death. And of these pains, the worst of all is the pain of death, so that there be no fear at the time of death, that the body not be in pain at the time of death, that there be calm and composure at the time of death, the importance of the Dharma. But most importantly of all, in subsequent lives, that one is able to deliberately take for their place of rebirth a fortunate place, rather than a hell realm, a fortunate realm. This too, the purpose of the Dharma.
나 근데 이비다 동해 저 등에 되게 마요야 전달하다 최 때문에 치고를 했어. 다 전달이 시작을 다 최념내 지난 간지 치고를 했어. 나 지난 마시나 아니 그 지토그 말했잖아. 근데 이제 지난 시험 보고 다 지난데 간지 치고를 했으나 다만 좀 되게 되게 전달라. 다만 좀 가르쳐서 개와당 빅바 세계가 다 딩모드 뭐 쳐보고 요래서
To avert pain, then, is the purpose of the Dharma. We ought to say that. It ought to be said so that one is familiar with the objective of the Dharma. If one isn't familiar with the objective of the Dharma, there will be no Dharma in one's practice. And then to this end, in this explanation, we turn to virtue and non-virtue.
딕바이나 자 개와이나 자 고낭로 대신 고 대신 간데 용거스나 그는 동부 동해를 찾아나 동해 락과 되네 데스들 차모 다 동해 락과는 차모 받으라네 그 동해 드라마를 빼망고 요래서
Whether virtue or non-virtue, within virtues and non-virtues, there is a range from grosser to more subtle. Therefore, within any karma, a range in its subtlety.
그것이 겨울라야 예와들라 라과 참모 안들레 그바 망보시디 고거래 손어서
And so it is too with virtues, ranging from grosser to more subtle.
다들 인도도 마다 아주 가르쳐 그랬습니다. 아다 냠내 지용도 아니다. 간다 방자 다 니모 되서로다 니모 있는 대바이다 갔다 대바이스 그래 니모스 그래 방자서 산다 간 찍으다. 이제 강가로 다 니바 전부 내 취주 차워 봐도 니바 탐지 아니 빵와 마야 산다 전 두고 보고 열에 손어서
대답, 탐색.
니바 탐지 빵야 전 두고 보고 해서
For us in practice, there are klesha, non-virtues, abandonments. They're called klesha, they're called non-virtues, they're called abandonments. In short, they are to be abandoned, all of them synonymous, and to indicate the grave downfall following from each is the purpose here.
다 되게 니보 계획초 계속 여와겠다 초 첨부 간다 첨부는 차원 드라반의 차를 벌겠다 네 다다 어느 장기 줄로 그걸 그 투바 어디 고요래서
And then two, their antidote in the virtuous accumulation, that accumulation of virtues in its range from grosser virtues to the very subtle virtues, that they are all amassed to confront the accumulation of non-virtues. This too, the purpose.
다들 즉 소식이 있는데 지금 가는 틀라마 시외 제소 르다 정말시 가난에 나와 예바 템보니네서 아니 예배초 차시 차원남자 봉황 아니 계속 타다 두고 제발로 따도 받았는데 뭐 진짜로 없어.
So then I'll recite again the verse here. After death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follow. Finding firm and definite conviction in this, I must abandon even the slightest negativities and accomplish all virtuous deeds. Please bless me always to be mindful.
야, 다들 인도는 저 다다 뭐 되게 좋지요. 되게 좋디하고 뭐 맞으나 아니 개월도 단 개월 덮침보다 개월 두번 쳐봐도 용금 말. 재산 당보 되게 좋도 뭐심 받지 말라 나는 되게 안 좋다. 되게들 간데시가 생각도 되게 뒤중도 되게들라. 대서 그래. 이바들라다 먼저 된배는 알아서 캐라면 도박 캐라면 숨마 투박에 예바죠. 될라 또와서 당 알아서 그배 제는 네버 쳐봐다. 아니 지랑이 거는 뭐고네 나베게다 내 가르치는 되게 될라 디바스 아서 또와다 디바스 되게지 뭐시한 거라서
Regarding non-virtue, for us, we say this of non-virtue. First, that there are for those who have taken vows, when those vows are violated, these come to downfalls. So there are downfalls. There are two, those activities influenced by the klesha, the mental afflictions, when one harms another or engages in whatever form of activity influenced by the kleshas, and these two non-virtues.
당연히 단다 알레 추페렘 원치 시긴다. 돈바 있는 배당하고 돈바들라 소더기 돈바 아니 장주선배 돈바 나기 돈바 다 하나가 장주 람림 고란데 최종지 시기 지당하고 미기 팀 잠불림이 지당 팀다 때 말아도 미기 미비전 미기 팀이요 선제 비전 선제 팀이요 근데 이거 다당하고 시야지다 돈바 숨 캐라면 온도 제니 시에바이나 소더기 돈바 장주선배 돈바 나기 돈바 숨 캐라면 텔랑베 니바다 개와텔라 두안스 그래서
We'll assume we'll assume the acceptance of the principles of the Buddha Dharma and the vows in the practice of the Dharma, principally the Pratimoksha vows, the Bodhisattva vows, and the secret Mantrayana vows. This following from the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. Just as there are human laws for people, and there are natural laws among the animals, here too, there are these three vows, the Pratimoksha vows, the Bodhisattva vows, and the secret Mantrayana vows.
세상인데 다 동바다 계획이 동화되나 아니 다 동화도 간데서 다 받치고 그래서 다 동화도 하장게 마샤나 아니 고 이걸 교육 이걸 교다 아니 대고 제마 동에 계기로 와 세상 된데 이제 너무 동화도 봐 샤고 동화도 봐다 받치고 와 동화도 다 받쳐야 돼 아니 실주시 아주 배 땡이 통도를 치니 아니 랑게 베냐바 중얼 냐발라 냐바 켈네 아니 뭐 랑게 교바체 아니 진짜 지금에서 되는 켈렌제 아니 다 같이 그래서
When one violates a formal vow, and there is then this infraction to the vow must be purified. If it isn't purified, if an antidote isn't applied to it so that it is purified, then it is transformed into a non-virtue and results necessarily in pain as a consequence. Thus, it must be purified, and formally it is purified through a repairing ceremony. The repair made to the broken vow is to again make the commitment before the witness, the support, and commit oneself to never again committing the same fault.
다 소더게 동바이나 샤스 치주지도 가지고 샤바 치사다 치주지도 가지고서나 뭐 켈레서 다 랑기 켈로 정도라 아니 치주 최고래 식제 다 장주 선배 동바디 케 가능해요는 초주자와 산제 반디 초주자와 아니 장주 선배 코다 집에서 켈레요 샤바치도 초주자와 쓰다 제바 대체도 샤바치 오래서 당가지 동바 치주디 아니 도지상게 군대도 렌디 도지상 군대래요 샤도 도지상 군대 샤바치 오래서
For each respective vow, the respective mending of it, the Pratimoksha vow is taken from the abbot preceptor and it is repaired before the abbot preceptor. The Bodhisattva vows are taken before the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions. The confession and the purification and mending takes place too before the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions. And then the Mantrayana, as the vows are taken from the Vajradhara Buddha, the infraction to the vow is mended before the Vajradhara Buddha.
that's 개침부시다 그래서 샤바치 샤바치서 유모신 샤바치 오래 샤바치나 아니 다게 다나 아니랑 동에 용금하러 왔대 제가 개침부를 해서
And this is critical because if one identifies the object before which one must mend their broken vow, then that vow may in fact be repaired.
that's 동안 다주셔서 다 디바 예바디 디바 that 디바 샤야라다 님부터 없이 있으면은 디바 다그 말에 님부터 없이 참아 디바 다그래서
Here then, formal infractions, followed by misdeeds. Non-virtuous misdeeds must be addressed through the application of 4 antidote powers.
that 님부터 없이 당서 다른 망고 창자라 망자 통고 하나도 되게 자도 님부꾼도 주고 톱스틱 버치 당서 님부꾼도 주고 톱 한번 수준인데 톱 아니 그래 님부꾼도 주고 톱지 아니 이거를 예발을 납도 톱 땡기 톱스 아니 반대편에 되게 어디 시들라 님부터 없이 그래서
We've reviewed the 4 antidote powers many times, and again, the antidote powers are the antidote power of the application of antidote powers, the application of antidote powers, the antidote power of remorse, the antidote power of restraint, and the antidote power of the support.
Oh, yeah, so that I'm not okay, I'm make dan le shi go mi ke le sing do da ge we le ne mi ke le ne da le de la khandes ma zu le de la din de yo le che ba da le sa ba ho di ni ji mo xian re so
Our consideration of non-virtues here, of non-virtuous karmas, and our consideration of virtuous karmas, overall karmas must be identified as completed karmas and accumulated karmas.
Oh, yeah, I'm so cutting le ma cutting gone to see do sembe le tang sambe le ni to see ba oh na che da do da kan le che ba da le sa ba o da ti de kebar kariyoruz na 다 le cheba da le sakwa nipo de le kebar karus na cheba da sakwa niga yungyo chikche niga yungyo chikche ha tine le che la masakwa chik nipa che che la masakwa chikche ane tine le sakwa ma chebas ni sumba tikso da le cheba sakwa 제바다 싸바 니가 많이 벨레스 무시샤시다 무시지어서
Reviewing these again, the difference between a completed karma and an accumulated karma resembles the difference between volition or intention and executed action or execution. That is, consider the difference here between the completed karmas and accumulated karmas. That there are, in fact, four possibilities. The four possibilities are that the karma is both committed, completed, and accumulated. The first possibility. The second, that the karma is completed, but not accumulated. The third possibility, that it is accumulated, yet not completed. And the fourth, or not committed. And the fourth, that it is neither committed nor accumulated. Here are the four possibilities for any karma.
le che diroda le cheba da sakba niga yi mu tamu diroda ni tamu dirlaso le ba sakba niga yi ba oh ya le cheba sakba ni le di kale jorasna ende cheba sakba ngazo nyebele se jo nyebele di su kangalo karesna le bena sembe le da sambe le niga chesuna 아니 레디 예버와 레디 예버디 사벨레 사벨레 니가 책을 소스
Here then are those karmas, understood in this way, illustrated in this way. First consider that first possibility. That first possibility was both a committed karma and an accumulated karma, wasn't it? And what is in this category of a karma that is committed and accumulated? A committed, accumulated karma is a definite karma. It is both the volition and the execution. Where there is the volition and the execution, then the karma is definite.
Oh, that the shit my good. And I would moody never say I was choosing the Hagona called Sagbele ani Chebele, Niga Nidi, ani Le Neva, Tapenango Semjeru, so to the letter of the Pejarena, Sembuton, several somebody got a Lugiton, George and the Sesona, Le Neva, Le Neva Indi, 고 싸보다 제가 네가 책을 해송했어.
More having to do with committed karma and accumulated karma will come. But here, to understand the four possibilities is useful for you. This first possibility of a karma committed and accumulated, and thereby a definite karma, might be illustrated in taking the life of a sentient being in which there is the intention, I will kill this being, and then one executes physically. Where there is both the intention and the execution, then the karma becomes definite. This is a definite karma by force of both the commission of the action and its intention, the committed karma and the accumulated karma both present.
That is one. That's something on the leg. You would move my leg, Namja Shidu the money, ships, she president, Mala Yongreta. I'll come with data the date, Nieshan, Jamaya Magashi to some Lamsan, never chat with Yoro, or teaching in one, you use for us. Ani le, there was another le Chesaniga Chase. That in that le subway in la. Le subway in la, Cheva Maiba. Then this one, le Chesaniga the Tixon. That Chesaniga the Tixadu Zamba. Yeah, that le Cheva is the thing that le Cheva in Sawa Maini. Oh, that better, Chijedo, better, Shana. Ani Milam, that hung Milam Nala, some Milam Tang, any chick, Perang Bennett, Jalato, the Chawake, Yore, any Condo say, oh, Dizu Milam Natan, like they Condo wanted for the Milam Town Tawata. Yampe Chakbe wanted pay, Shana Gao Chevata, Pagarang Chala, and the Godu, the Cheva, the old Milam Tangro, what the Milam di. Milam Nang the dig that's the Tan Milam Tan Rangasam Sarvadi later Chevere Sabamare. So,
the second possibility, in accumulated karma that is not committed. We'll illustrate it as we began first with the first possibility of the karma committed and accumulated. Now in the second possibility, let's take in fact, making it clear, a committed karma that is not accumulated. This is the second possibility. The karma committed but not accumulated. Let's take as an illustrative example, a subject here, an example here, what occurs in a dream. Dreaming, when one sees objects and is desirous for them, or has aversion toward objects in the dream, it's the dreaming produced by the afflicted mind of anger that causes the aversion in the dream, or desire that causes one to search out desirable objects in the dream. In the dream, through the dream, these appear to the mind. The karmas are committed, but the karmas are not accumulated.
아니 이 세대 보면돼 요 말와 거기 류가 좀 내가 자가 좋은 말와 맨날 그 밀람부터 밀람 당시다 그 류가기 돈 내체요 말와 나집에서 그 셈부터 내가 집에서 그내 제발에 싸봐 말했어.
아니 우마가 저기 식세대 양식 장당
밀람 미게 유다 통내니
어레레
세게 눈을 잡아 제겨 봤어.
레레레
밀람나는 이 세만 밀람 땅 안에 세사를 보면 셈난 체인데 잡아 제기로 이내 곧 룽아지 내줘 말.
Yeah.
어디
And from a verse of the Madhyamaka Avatara, entering the middle way, objects seen in a dream move the fool as though they were real. A dreamer dreams of a beautiful woman, perhaps, and grows desirous for her, and wakes desirous for her, though she is but a dream. So the karma is committed, but there has been no execution physically or verbally. The karma committed, yet not accumulated, as this verse from entering the middle way.
어이 때 신바야 데데도다 배 신바로 배나가서 미 침을 캐바 미지 그침 차단 신이 미지나 거기 아니 세미나라 미교 주가 텐토그를 삼토그를 이나야 그 릉아 돈을 줘봐 지금 말로 가서 그 침신 너를 교회다 연대 셰바도 그 지금 말로 어디서도 아니 제발 싸봐 말해서
Ale mi degwa denzo ani chegi marwa singire
그 릉아 셈나네 때 때는 소주바다 마지막에도 셈네 텐시그를 삼기로 와 이나야 릉아가 지금 말 dom도 그 침도 신기요 와 배나다 최저야 고신이 되나 그 누가비 이모 계기를 내는 이모들 속에 그 내가 지금 말와 어디로 그래서 제발 싸고 말해서
And another illustration might be through the person who knows very well karmic causality, knows karmic law, such that they are familiar with the 10 paths of non-virtuous action and restrain themselves from engaging in any of those non-virtuous paths of action. They don't execute any action that is motivated by any mental affliction, yet the mental affliction might occur to them, it might occur in them, but as it doesn't cause any execution physically or verbally, it is not acted upon, therefore it occurs to the mind and is committed, but isn't accumulated.
다 무수바디 살라 마치버들 무수바디 셀라 마사바다 살라 마치바 니와
살라 마치바
다 살라 마치바디 기데르 페나다 셈지 레사 룽아지 마치바 아니 룽아지 레 듀요와 세부사소 셈지 삼베나라 룽아지 탄다 루기 디오로 숨요와 마기 시요와 듀요와 오 듀모데 셈지 삼 아니 룽아도 마제바인가 아니 사바를 제바 말해서
didn't 따라 되시켜나 살서
안돼
아니 제바 셀라 마사바 따라
셀라
사바 생성
가르가르 젤라 마사바들
젤라 마사바 아니 강라 아니 조살서
젤라 마사바도서 다살라 마제바디
살라 마제바디 그래서
대단한 이변 찍고 책마다 그래서 니디 밀럼나기 디 밀럼나기 디바 제바제 마사바라서 마사바도 차서 다 살라 마제바디 셈지 살라 룽아지 마제바 아서 베디라 듀디 셈지 살라 룽아지 마제바 저와 어디제 베디라 루이고는 숨디다 마지고는 시디 셈지 사 루이 마제바 어디지라
The third possibility of the accumulated karma that is not committed. This is about this illustrating this possibility is the mind that conceives of non-virtuous paths of action that are physical and verbal, yet these are not executed physically or verbally.
야, 나 무시디 알레 냐데스 달레 무시디 장조 당당하고 양 저바 제일 말 제일 고치기를 단다 알레 배전 좀 장조 모저 좀 쉬요 송스.
Just so that you can orient yourself through these four possibilities, and then with that opening, explore further, and we will later. I just introduce the four to you now.
야, 다 레제 남샤 신의 고주고요랑 레제 제가 골마 셀 월스타 시라 셀 그래 송스.
As we're only now just beginning this presentation of causality, all of this will grow clearer as we move forward.
야. 다 디네 다 아주 다 되게 지단 레 모조 체야게 되게체 다 딘데 이들은 다레 딕바 생이지라 다레 딕바 생이 다 동안 셔라 딕바디나 다 님부 톱시게 다 고두 잡아 다 당부 님부 톱시게 나네 다 아주 망체가 다 양도 가면 님부 톱시가 또 망부 셰자로와 아야 때스 섬을 망해 봐도 더워서 유나 아니 님부 톱시게 나네 계시쇼디 나바 수집에 톱스 나바 수집에 톱스를 말 사바 딕발에 닝 타바네 교바체버다 말 사사바 랑게 사세베 딕발라 다 샤바 타야지도 탑 당부디 아니 딕발 교바체야 아다 딕미도 섬 교바체들에서
This then just the introduction to karmic causality, and now turning again to misdeeds generally, misdeeds separate from formal infractions. In the misdeed that requires the application of antidote powers for its purification, and these antidote powers which we have repeatedly considered, again, a reminder that of these antidote powers, it is the antidote power of remorse that is especially critical. That antidote power of remorse is the reflection on accumulated action for which one is responsible and which one would purify, and the remorse for having engaged in such an action. Oh, such an action is improper.
yes, that 이제 딱 교바체기 딕바들 다 랑게 쳔베 딕바요레 마쳔베 딕바요레서
And of remorseful action, there are those that are recalled and those that aren't recalled.
yes, 안도 디니파 야체르사나 아니 랑게 쳔베 딕바 시엔라 쳔도 주베 딕바 시엔기 개발 시엔기 딕바 쳔발라 제수이라고 딕바 어디데 망고요레서.
And in misdeeds, they are of all many different kinds, those for which one is personally responsible and in which one acted directly, those that one influenced another to engage in, and the misdeeds of others in which one rejoiced.
yeah, 이제요. 세상 이들마다 아주 샤야 딕바트 한국 딕바트 뭐 마시나 딕바 샤야 데 제약을 가고요. 전고 전은 아니 랑게 뭐 전배 딕바 랑게 딕바 체신이 전고에 계신 거래. 아니 마지막도 semnale 아우 미 딕바트 제 유시기를 예 배우마 딕바트 제 쇼르 제버 쇼르 시기를 아니 제 딕바 제바 뭐 마시마들이 요 딕바 거리 있는 이 보라다 샤기 이미 삼배 이제 샤바 치기 때문에 노리나 배 지금 말고 배 간다 요바 치기 삼 디삼바도 거래 손어서
To confess to and purify any misdeed, there must be the awareness of the misdeed or its possibility, directly recalling misdeeds for which one is responsible, recalling them in their particulars wherever possible, and then recognizing too that there are misdeeds for which one is responsible in all likelihood, which nevertheless one doesn't necessarily recall. These possibilities of non-virtues, these possibilities of misdeeds for which one may well be responsible too, having slipped up at some point, these two ought to be brought to mind. And then for all such misdeeds for which one is responsible, all of them would be confessed to and then purified with the acknowledgement that any error whatsoever is unfit, is improper. This would be the outlook in the remorse which causes purification.
Oh yeah, pedang pedro de no luyu sta basic mata luyu namda do shubaina pena kan kombolu homa komba sing komba jogalama ani megi tak kel kan ani potus keche no komba jogara was 제가 de komba joya ge genzen do luyu gari yoresna no kombolu kuzi ngoma sila ani korang chiba chunju yidu zamba zala zemutze nani zadegi nyamdola zadu tendu zamba ani romanchi kela zadu tenzi romanchi kechebe digba di ani korangi sha matu bache sha matu enda du le deyo sedan digi nami gi kengi kuzi dila tongba nyingo sumdo to be ganga che tsara de ina yang ani legi nami di matawa inda tama nami di wangi 아니 자 수수께라 따담는 공부서가 되는 수들로 되게 요래서
아니 부족마 아니 세버디 개왕아마 기대버라 다시
영어만 보고 춘주지들로 그런 세네 샤과 제마도 봐 하이거라 되게 남이 세들 민바래서
an account, a liberation story that illustrates the consequences of fully ripened results when they are not addressed through the application of antidote powers is the story from the life of Arya Nagarjuna. Arya Nagarjuna died. Arya Nagarjuna completed his intention when he was decapitated by a blade of grass. This is how Arya Nagarjuna completed his intent. And how did it happen that way? The liberation story, the account of Arya Nagarjuna, it tells the story of Arya Nagarjuna in a previous life when he was a youth playing in the grass. And as he was playing in the grass, then he inadvertently sliced off the head of an ant, and this misdeed went unaddressed. And later Arya Nagarjuna directly perceived emptiness. Nevertheless, the fully ripened result that would be consequence of the decapitation of the ant remained, and it was the completion of Arya Nagarjuna's intent in his own decapitation by a blade of grass that was the ripening of this fully ripened result.
Oh, today you do Korangida Andar Buddhi Page you made send Yobata. Ani Page said, Page that Dixon Samate Joa Town, Yomarde, Ina Young Buddhi said became a rangamid the young would was. I'm around to delay young Sapchiva. But not so baby. Semji so 주베래 자와치디 담보베스 아주 소 줘야 자기 변 소 주베기 네바 차단 상황라 가르고래 시 삼바 조와 타두 시탕을 때 시탕을 앞에 소비를 최초 작을와 그래서 아주 이제 참기를 고물을 되게 참기 말해서
In the case of Arya Nagarjuna, the intention to kill an ant was absent in him. The reflection after the execution of the act too was absent in him. Nevertheless, there was a fully ripened result that must result in this case as well. It is all the more dire our situation for us in which we intend non-virtuous actions. All the features of a non-virtuous action, ensuring that it is accumulated, are always present for us in the basis, which is identified, in the intention, in its full execution, and then in its completion.
yeah, that was okay. When I saw you in that, they never can live with us. They never be a child. Kasna, that was sambas. Tambus say, she. The saw you in a saw you, Tambo saw you, Paju, Simjig, she got Paru, saw you, she chick. And it delay samba. Samba won't get that, somebody like Duchet or Kulung, you must soon younger. Oh, yeah, that is, oh, you move soon
아니
younger.
뒤시다 요몽 송당.
Duchet,
네.
Sambache,
네.
you move.
네.
Sumi Mawada, let the mother is still in oh, this year, that's somebody else on. Then Joa de la Mazuta, so Nungurwa, the Jagudu, Meta Jawu, Skate, Amgudu, the Joa, Tabu Mangu, Joa the other. And Tardu, Rangmashibon, Paju Shivas, or the dish sheet sounds on, and that soldier with Alam Zobas in the restaurants.
The four features are first the basis, the being, the creature that is, for instance, whose life is taken. That individual, that sentient life is the basis for the action. The action is undertaken by the second feature, which is the intention that involves discernment, the involvement of mental afflictions. Then this intention is executed, the third feature. Its execution is the execution with, in the case of taking life, perhaps a knife, in a stabbing, a gun, in a shooting, and then other possibilities like strangulation. And then the fourth feature is the completion of the action, which is the death of the sentient being. All of these four features, when complete, make for the completion of that path of non-virtuous action.
Oh, yeah, that's what she did. She did a Kanadi Gorsna, Rana Shemba, Harubuimba, Penamazuina, that's a the go say at the Manoro, Pagish. You go what that, Pagis say at the round Tadeba Simje, that's Simje in the me in the Karina, that's Suzu Tadeba.
We will consider the basis here. The basis is an other than oneself. That other sentient being, separate from oneself, makes the basis for the action.
Oh, yeah, that in it. Samba de la, I think Sumishemba, Samba de la, Samba Dushi, Kulunchi, Yumusumi or Shemba, and that Tambo Dushi did that, Sejadi, any Matua, Sejadi, Suzu, say music, this say was some Tamoni, Samba Tang, and Sejadi, this Sejadi Monology, say what you call resonance.
Isn't the any Samba de la, any Sumira, any Dushi, Yomong, Kuno.
Oh, Kulunchi, any Yumusum. Tambo Samba de Lina. Samba de Samba Matua, Dushi Matua.
The second feature of intention involves three parts itself: discernment or unmistaken identification of the object. That is, the object which will be interacted with is clearly discerned. The intended object is correctly identified.
Oh, yeah, that Niba Kulungilla, Kulundilla, Kulung Sendu, Samba de Gora.
Within intention itself, which has its own three characteristics, the first of which is discernment. The second is the motivation being the intention to interact with the basis.
Oh, yeah, that's about Numot. Numodilla, the Jash, that the Musunga Yungres, Musunga Yungres. That in the Musunga and Tambo Shedan, and Pondo de Maneosna, Shedan on the Pajugo, the round bed, Kundusani, and the Pajumola, the say out the party to the say that and said the she did with the tire that you're gonna save someone at Ura, Shedan. That in a Suzuki Jata full of churning. I'll never get to bang you go send them to Marson Corporate. And that Jata would turn anybody. Not churning, they bought a shoe, but a cousin did chain Pajong Shisona, and she tango on Shiva response.
The klesha, the afflicted minds involved in the intention, or desirous attachment, aversion, ignorance, in an instance of anger motivating an action that other, separate from oneself, discrete and different from oneself, that other individual whom one would kill through stabbing or through another means. And then once killed, one would evaluate one's own action to see whether it had been seen through to completion and they were in fact dead. This is an action motivated by anger, with a notion of there being an enemy who has harmed one, against whom one would retaliate. One might strike them, one might stab them. And following that, when one looks to see whether the blow to them, the stabbing of them, whether it completed what one intended. This motivated by aversion.
오예, 근데 되자 왕게 때 가는 용어서 세탄 도서다 이거 되자 되시게 되자를 있나? 근데 나가서 파중을 파주보고 시작다 빠빠라. 시작산데도 빠빠 건데들 차고 쏘기 오게 레슨제 파주 쏘지 아니라게 그거 시작다 빠빠서 그것도 롱주가 지금로 어디서 되자고 온 소주가 자그래서
Desire, which motivates an action, motivates in such a way that the meat, the fur, the pelt of the other is seen as valuable and desirable, and this causes one to take the life of the other.
Oh yeah, that's what Timu that deja condo the genie to the Munito, the Nimusum, but Timu. That Timu won't get us and Jay's best servant of the Penata. Chick Chigi love and Chigi use love and it bears some Jay Savage. Bears some Jay Bay. George Habukon Bass, some Jay said, and Church had to do that Timu on the chair. And it's Pagay some Jay. And say, any ancient dollar by Jean to the chair to go, then I yard in the set and progress key the chalice of Jimatan to the Zugamata, Bishop of Momberg only. And that's sort of never you were resonance.
And ignorance causes the taking of life in such cases where one engages in ritual sacrifice, believing that ritual sacrifice is a form of spiritual practice, and then violently one takes life, ostensibly in the practice of in a spiritual practice. This is ignorance at play. And when one takes the life of one sentient being in order to give that in an act of generosity to another sentient being, for instance, to kill fish, to feed dogs, this too is a form of ignorance. Huh?
Oh yeah, that in it. Tardu did that run my shibola shandy, she was go first ones.
It is, yeah. And the completion of an act requires, in the case of taking life, that a living being then becomes a no longer living being.
Oh yeah, that's so cheap, lady Town Chevala. Is Miji Rangi, Pessimje, the Rangi Lan and Savage Guru, Suzuki Lava.
Does one have to directly take the life of another in order for that action of taking life to be complete? One hasn't got to directly with one's own hands take life.
Oh, I think also if what the Shejadu, then a rangi cheba, chela chedu chuba, Shengi cheba, Jesu Yera, Sum to Shejaiba, or did that under the kill for this one.
Just as we say in the case of non-virtues, one may engage in them directly or cause others to engage in them, or one may rejoice in the misdeeds of others. There are these possibilities.
Oh yeah, Benata, Rangi Massive, Shenla said, Juwaina, Rang Sochi, never the younger sons.
So it is then, if one causes another to take the life of yet another, one is responsible.
Oh yeah, it is Shengi, so Jesuna. Oh, Dagda Chunzu, Mesa, the course said the Dagda is some Gogomna, and it is around so never you
And if one causes another to take the life of yet another, and then one rejoices in that, reflecting, they have taken the life that I wish would be taken, then this this completes the act.
Oh, yeah. That in the independent rank massive as a shen, say Jubayina, so niche the way you were so much.
And when one does cause another to take the life of yet another, one accumulates for oneself the karmic responsibility of having taken two lives.
Oh, yeah. Will say Jubale, rank session, the watching on your mares.
So it would be, if one were to do it oneself, to only accumulate the karma of taking one life, but here it is twice as much.
Oh, yes, it's not the so the so that dinner she done the so chever the bell junction. That dinner she make you Hama Gangal Jargo.
This has been this has been for the purpose of illustration, taking the case of taking life. This may be applied to each non-virtue.
Oh, yeah, I did. So the command of Chinese in the people. To be Malan, to be married, some Luna. Hang it, oh, your chesha, you get what chesha may some, and just some chamber enough. Any that's also your mention, doctors to give your mares. Because I'm also divorcing the Pazi woman ship, divorcing it. Go under that, Rangi chair, your Tantangas called Shabanashi, Shen chair to Juga. Shinji Chijola Rangi Chesu Irachi to Dinashi, and around with seminar, similar Namdo Tayebarwa, Namdo Tayeba in the Namdo Regonga, the Mamasa, Namdo the four Nimu Choldrona, the Bachado or seven, the body around the Hammer word on the Mamasa or Resons.
Ordinarily, continuously, during each and every day, we imagine ourselves to be responsible for virtuous karmas, and imagine ourselves not to be responsible for the whole host of non-virtuous karmas for which we are responsible. If one carefully considers this, it becomes clear that one's comportment isn't quite right at all. This is because there are innumerable kinds of non-virtues unknown to us for which we are responsible. They take the form of those in which we are directly responsible and those that we caused others to engage in, and then those that we relish when others engage in. But because the mind is filled with innumerable discursive thoughts, and for every discursive thought there is a non-virtuous karma, so then the non-virtuous karmas are innumerable, and so many of them are of the form of those unknown to us.
뭐야, 근데 이제 좀 땅하나도 간다를 거기 당신 가운데 시야겠다. 내 이거 생이 되나? 라과. 아니 라과 맞지? 참어 라과네 참어 받았다. 내기 남샤 빼 망보. 장가 제모토야 망보 요래서.
And so it is with karmas and non-virtues that run the gamut from very gross to very subtle, grosser and grosser and grosser, to subtler and subtler and more subtle, the gamut of non-virtues for which we are responsible, and the karmas for which we are responsible.
지상한테 딩바디 샤와 샤도 잠바 라과도 샤 대와요 레하 참어도 샤하고 님부 똑 침부 때문에 그래서 딩바 참을라 님부 똑 침부 딩바 라과도 님부 주지면 되는 말에 대단하도 딩바 라과도 뭘 봐샤 대오지 샤 아니 참어도 샤야라다 동반이도 장주고 쓰면은 샤투 말와 제자는 동반이도 장주스 빌레 제고야 빈센테레서
제자는 라파든서 아니 님보 톱디 아니 충충기 아니
또좀
그래서
참으도 님부 또 침보고
그래서
아 장주스면 좀좀 말하고
then we must eliminate the non-virtues, and in doing so, when we do so, the grosser form of non-virtuous karmas are the easier karmas to eliminate. It is the subtle non-virtues that are most difficult to eliminate. They require an antidote of greater intensity for their removal. The very subtle non-virtuous karmas require penetration to emptiness and bodhicitta for their elimination.
오예 나 이제 나도 제 드림만 다 대샤 아니 아빠의 안들 레이 걸 가는 거 대시 대시 잡는 편도 친구들 되고도 대샤도 저 같은 저 보스 아니 제단단 랑이 이만이만이 냠내 나가 단 랑이 배 말한저고 왕고치 미개어 주 한가지 당아도 잡투고 여데 있네 미개어 주디 약고지 뭐 마셔나 아니 미개어 주디 뭐 마셔be 왕기 아니 맞아 방야 마체 아니 마방와 제샤 아니 샤두고 니만이만이 팔은 또 친구 자도 라는 배 이거 친구 차나 아니 샤마도야 되는 얘가요 제가 이 샤과체 시라 개침을 해서 놓선 내샤 저한테 이소
Understanding of karmic causality is critical, so the importance of any explanation of it, which has just begun now and more remains to be said, but we can conclude here and begin with our Q&A. In any event, in every day of our own practice, though it's easy enough to count 10 non-virtuous paths of action, they're countable. Yet when there is no subtle familiarity with just how it is that non-virtuous karmas accumulate and how it is that they most certainly must be abandoned, and so long as one hasn't gained a thorough understanding of this, then those non-virtues remain, and they remain unaddressed, no application of any antidote power to them, and so they increase running the risk that eventually one will be incapable of ever expiating them again totally. But we will conclude here and begin with our Q&A. Now, if there anything isn't clear, or if there are any doubts, if we discuss those things, then they might naturally grow clear.
Yeah, okay, Jason,
I'm just curious about the example of Nagarjuna, and you had said that he inadvertently killed the ant, but then it sounded like the karma accumulated to him. I'm just curious about a little more explanation about that.
Tadani ani gomboluruk ya ani 그래서 징받제네로 징받제네 아니 공부도 수데 아니 저시 기어 나서 다 될라 아니 메도신도 아니 보디 세버와
메도신도 무슨 막 그런 쯤쯤
쯤쯤으로
아니 보디 되는 것도 제주도 제제 쇼로 와 뒤도 그런 거 마신 봐 이내다 제마 그런 동문이 무슨 동문시 도도서 많이 뭐만 그런 게 아직 예배 때 레들이 산 샤미도 와서 뭐 제버지 그런 샤버지도 아니 내게 제부디 미 가도 미양 단다 아니 단다디 그런 게 진다 예부 대주 상부 여러와 예부 대주 상부 보기 아니 그걸로 좀 정갈래로와 아니 정도도 뭐 그런 좀 두고 여말 아니 좀 맞대도 그런 게 제일 차선 전에 막 내주 시에도 말 그런 이거를 그냥 말 짜지기 내게 담제다 내 시기를 마시서는 그냥 네 고다 소분이 가가서 봐도 샤쇼스 그런 명한테 진짜 거기 짜지도 스케일 담는 그런 게 책을 와 어떻게 되지 알았어
아니 지신기 집에기 때와디 아니 이 부족마디 아니 세고 somebody 메바로 somebody 메나야 아니 콘라 아니 레가 사버레 사수 간지 사버레
어쨌든 그 제일 수행 소를 내로 이게 소 찍어로 와 일단 걸 내가 되게 오는 거 좋아 내가 되게 남이 되고 좋아
Arya Nagarjuna didn't 아니 대주상국이 아니 공부를 아니
상부 부
부 세그로 대 공부를 아니 세게 오그로 세가 레브로
레기도 코란 세마투로 안 제일 코란 저랑 같이 김에서 나 저랑 공부 좀 요새를 나 시고는 되게 이게 제일 싸담시 나 시기를 해서 나 엄마 들리듯이 제는 얘기 내가 남이 샤바 재미도 마샤바 있는 얘기 남이다 할 뒤에 좀 나타나 내가 남이 좀 와. 이제는 보는 게
Arya Nagarjuna didn't inadvertently took the life of the ant when he was playing in the grass and playing with the grass. The ant that was in the grass died, and it wasn't intended by Arya Nagarjuna at that time. And later on, when Arya Nagarjuna penetrated emptiness and achieved the power of recollecting past lives, Arya Nagarjuna reviewed again his responsibility in that action and was aware of it. And at that time, the prince son of the patron to Nagarjuna approached Nagarjuna, needing to take the life of Nagarjuna and prostrating to Nagarjuna, then proposing that. And then the prince son attempted to take Arya Nagarjuna's life, but wasn't able to. And Arya Nagarjuna provided some advice to the prince. I'm responsible yet for the negative karma of having taken the life of an ant in this way when I was playing in the grass, and I didn't properly apply antidote powers to it at the time. And there is a fully ripened result yet to ripen. And exploiting that, you might succeed in taking my life by using a blade of grass to decapitate me.
Yeah, that's enough.
Ishila say something about forgiveness and reconciliation from victims or some of the
아니 교심 세리디당 아니 너가 켈켄다 너가 켈세미 아니 바르둠 체다인데 데니게 자와 직 아니 kalop yang mena di jasikyo na yobe tene rabo gyosin che da ani neba ke ken chi gi ani neba kyose mi deni ani bardum che da
디 말다 다지나 교바체스 수술한 반다 벌돔 제세된 길 미스바실레기로 와 미스바실레기로 와 나나 교심 제세디 교바체세디 랑 내가 치는 아직에 뒤마서 넣어서 배에 수수 sem반나다 배는 아주 미지 스텝이나 세는 코페 아우 당에 코 세버 뒤송 산나 다고 소주를 내는 그 숙심부 저러 내 예바 차로 와 세트좀 아주 당에 때 뒤마서 알고 당에 레마서 삼 교바체나 내는 조금 말 가서 디고 야제도 마서는 시우 친구 켜버 줘서 나 근데 벌돔 제세디엔 코 데스 미순버지 용제는 그 낭지 제대로 군이 벌을 때 개발 도와서
There's a difference between these two. First of all, the remorse itself is an independent act. It's an independent mental event for the person who is responsible for an action, independent of any third person, and the reconciliation or the reconciliation is usually comes about by an intermediary, a third person. And in this case here of remorse, it's an independent mental event, taking stock of personal responsibility, for instance, having taken a life, recognizing that this is improper, that it was improper, and when there is remorse for any action, then that remorse for the action undermines the completeness of the action itself, and so there ends up being a significant difference between the action that doesn't involve any remorse and the action that causes for remorse. That second, the action with the remorse that ensues is different altogether from the action that doesn't cause any remorse. But in the case of a reconciliation, there'll be a third person often.
배나다 개발 보루를 개발도 가지고 여러분 배나 되대요다. 요즘지 개발이나 배나 아주 매도다베 수직 수용 감독하는 수용 이거 감부 수용 감부 밖에 샤샤나 아니 교심 맞게 버리 배나 아주 수용 도지 감부 도지 샤샤나 고 이래다 누가 콜 계약 누가 좀더 여러 있는 거 계획 말와 그 계약 치도를 류도 추들을 누구로 어디나 신전이다 그 교심 계샤여나 수용 감부 하고도 잘 콜 누가 내가 잘 고라랑 게투 말이야 그 교심 깨면은 콜 추도 류가가 처바도 뒤에가가 처바도 차대요 그래서 콜내 예버 잘 그래서 이거 깨니 봐라 이거 깨니 봐인데 내 예버스나 그래서
The difference between the action without remorse and the action with remorse is the difference between a moist seed and a seed left dry. That is the seed put into the earth and then for the earth to remain dry, for there to be an absence of any water or fertilizer, leaves that seed which has the potential to germinate ungerminated for a want of water and fertilizer, because there's no water, no fertilizer. What is a seed with the potential to sprout remains unsprouted. And this may be likened to an action with remorse. The remorse deprives the seed of the fertilizer and the moisture it requires to sprout. But where there's an action and there is no remorse for it, all of the conditions for it to sprout, for it to germinate are present. And so it is, as it were, definite as a karma.
야, 아니, 무슨 소리야? 소리 다시 봐야지.
어쨌든 이슈기 카초바 여러와 카초바 하고 이베 카초바도 아니 카체 스스기 냠는 제단데 여러와
예.
소소기 아니 또 보탕네 소소기 고만네 사격이 레디 아니 멤버체 당 여러와 네 간드시래
근데 저한테 그 유튜브 생마다 인도를 열어와. 인도기 동체 순간은 좀 시소는 다르바 탑을 내려와.
그래
여기까지로 와. 아니 먼저 네 요거랑 류데 네 버게 네 함을 세 가지 내가 강바시하면 누가 다 싸도 제가 지가 네 제주나들랑 되고 다 그랬어 그러와. 나고 네 지단 수수 출루부터는 까지 들어와. 이내다 류기 나자 다 왔다 대del라야까지 까지 체내는 뒤고 다 왔으니 열어와. 단단 가지고 셈기는 뒤고 다 마다마 류기 뒤고 셈기 뒤고 다는 류기 뒤고 다 봐. 류기 뒤고 다는 셈기 뒤고 다게 매봤다. 네기 개발을 거는 용어로 왔다.
얘네 데 소소 아니 또 보탕 왔라 ngomane ani kulong di yogra de ngarangi ani ngomane sagyogi ani migewe ani tikve ledi ani tapar show samne ani soso la ani to potangne ani somebody yore dene
이제 출루 간가 열어.
ine de somebody gi wangi ani simgi ani le dikpati da droge marwe
다른 말. 다디 고족이 고난족이 삼로저로 고난족이 닉받지 다 해줘라. 이제 다 그러와. 단단 가지고 내 뜻이 잡대 셈이 유목을 뒤바 다 해줘라. 이 다른 말. 코아 나도 코아래 탈해야 돼. 이거 다 보여줘라. 이 다른 말. 그냥 고난족이 닉바 시야 닉바디 다 그래. 그 닉바 삼로와. 배낭 가지고
da droge du potang soso du potang
고난게 켈레 이 다르라. 이내 단단 가지시에 디버디다 디버 참은 샤로와. 디콜 딜 다투야 개고 요마라. 셈비 디버디 다와라. 셈비 디버 다와라. 다 동문이 또야 답시만도 신바 요마라.
The interpreter's question to Geshe-la is this: there are practices of, for instance, self-flagellation that the intention of which is to purify non-virtues for which one is responsible, and wouldn't it happen that if there is the intention through this self-flagellation, may I ripen those non-virtuous karmas to their consequence and thereby purify them. If this happens in the individual, shouldn't it happen that the non-virtue is purified? Geshe-la's response that there's this Christian amongst Christians such a practice, among Hindus such a practice, a belief even in the case of in Hindu practice that you might jump from a cliff and this might achieve for you liberation, or you make a floorboard with nails and walk across it, and this will purify non-virtuous karmas. These and other austerities belong to a kind of practice with this view. But it isn't our view that any amount of abuse to the body purifies the cause of non-virtue that are the klesha in the mind. And the objective here is to thoroughly purify the mind of klesha, and this is the liberation in our context. And for the subtlest form that klesha take, there is no means for its elimination apart from penetrating insight to emptiness.
간다르 수수 미유치 좀 미스미에나 미유치 좀 수미여와. 배나다 간다 아주 모티브 저이나 주르버. 먼저 저이나 대외감도 수기감도 견도다. 수매감도 견매봤다. 두매감도 탈발다고. 수매감도 탈발다고 그러지나 그 수매기 감 터버지도다 답이 수매기 균형주 공거와. 검내는 수매를 깨서는 그 탈발 통수를 간가 탈발 통수를
아니 수매감이 탈발 터비라 아니 가르치기래.
균형주 수매기 균형주 공거. 수매기 균형주. 수매기 3대 수매기 무시곰. 모시고는 깨도 수면 깨로라.
Ale, ngasi
삼매지
gom.
모시 수매지 모시로라.
Aha,
수매지 모시고 뭐.
ale.
수면 모시고 수면 깨 부사오라.
Aha,
대바다 수는 깨도다 수면의 예대도 통과. 통하는 균임 주고는 수면 깨로라. 뭐든 당한서 수면 코랑 한 거에 내려. 일레 탈고랬어. 나도 코랑 탈고 되셔와. 저도 양조 코알 막 깨워면 깨워내 뭐가 있잖아. 아니 코알 탈바서 가지고 되시디게로와. 그래서 그냥 감 고마들라 연된다 콘도 고마 톱스는 탈바 톱스라고 그러와. 어떻게 개발 그래서.
There'll be between, for instance, some three people, three different objectives, three divergent views. Take the Tirthaka, the non-Buddhist heretics, and their view that the desire realm has its faults, and one would meditate on the faults of the desire realm and then induce the clairvoyances of the formless realm so as to achieve rebirth in the formless realm. And then upon rebirth in the formless realm, these Tirthakas believe this is liberation. Yet in cyclic existence in samsara, the formless realm is but one realm in samsara. And the liberation entailed here of ours is liberation from samsara. But from other points of view, these upper realms of samsara are liberation, according to those views.
야, 가수자다 있어. 우리 여러 부모님 무대도 공헌하는 가지고 나오고 다이는.
Thank you, Vishla. I'm following up on Jason's question. I still have some confusion about the story with Nagarjuna. The word inadvertently was used, and to my mind, that means that there's a lack of intention to take a life. And so my understanding of karma is that in order for there to be karma, one needs to be having some intention in the action. And maybe there's some level of thoughtlessness or carelessness, like a knowledge, for example, that there might be bugs in this grass, but I don't care. I'm going to play anyway. That kind of thinking seems to involve some, at least carelessness about taking life. But but without either some level of carelessness, like drinking alcohol and driving. You don't intend to go out and kill somebody, but there's clearly some responsibility there. In the story with Nagarjuna, I'm not understanding there to be any kind of intention whatsoever. So that confuses me with regard to the reaping of karmic consequences.
양결 아니 제생기 슈베 아니 치와 대당 라봇 아니 라봇직 아니 슈예인 바 가인선데 게시게 아니 렌답 나와 대게 아니 나랑게 더바 데 상마송 아니 제당 제당데 아니 공부르르기 남타르 아니 직송송 아니 남타르 데라 아니 공부르르 개와 나말라 아니 보고 인드 세마세지 잠발라 아니 부직 세버레 이내야 강속네 세메바 강속네 세메바 하마고네 아니 세쇼거와 다 제자 아니 삼베 레디 메바 삼베 레디 메나 아니 레간데스 아니 사용거레 베나디 나라 디 로타면 라완 라보 통근도와 다 델라 아니 세사 델라 짜요레 짜기 나로라 아니 보요서레 얘네야 때 보든서 아니 낭매 땅네 세모세나 티 밤에기 아니 쩌버다버와 아니 밤에기 쩌베기 왕기 아니 데베 레디 아니 사 탁주레 얘나야 때 마삼신도 때 삼베 치안 메나야 아니 레간데 사용 페나데 미직 아니 창락 퉁네 아니 머리 땅네 아니 미 세기 니가 시부지 요래 아니 디 수수기 아니 장라 아니 통내 바그람 땅샤나 디 밤에기 쥐어봐 밤에기 쥐어베기 왕기 아니 레사 용그래 얘네 마삼신드 메드신드 하마고네 아니 그래서
이거 세마도 제시자나 이거 이랑이 레 마침벨레 말한 수수그 챔벨레 마침벨레 망고도 되나 요레세다 대단한 게 저랑 달라진 아주 미개의 초나 남이 종의 주수 마상나야 뭐게 소주그 레름 줘발라 이게 시 삼바 좋다도 시 창내 소주 제바이나 소주 벨레 전부 다 되네 지네 직니 마상나 소주 레 충아 어찌다고 레 지중이 제발 되네지 시기 요레스 단단하고 디글레죠 나시 개벨레 셴데 테스 코데야 요섬 되게 도스 내가 아주 좀 되게 로마나 좀 되게 그런 뭐 지대는 표지 로마나라 로케이션이 김다 베베스로 김다 베베 그런 김다 베베 그런 아니 잡도 좀 잡아라 아니 가르쳐서는 몽게기 불라 좀 되게 몽게 불라 나는 와 나도 몽게기 불라 결혼을 잡도 좀 깨와면도 손은면도 손 아니 손도 잡아는 꼭 무유 좀 되들 싶은가 되들 세도라도 개요 말에 몽게기 부 땡이 탈심부터 탑이요 말에스 맞좀 되지 디싱시반 땡이 탈로 결혼을 내사 요래 결혼을 내기 손음 싸요 손음 요레스 근데 좀 되지 그 시작을 근데 지시 가르쳐서는 결혼 뭐만 껴 뭐만 지라 아니 최대 지라 최대지 틀라 추 차업하는 추도 스코르게 되도 아니 추 키도도 짜지가 않아 결혼도 아니 심지 도마지 개월에 짜디가는 결혼 기여를 짜디도 최대로 꼬르게 되자마는 결혼이 최대로 꼬르게 제가 꼬르게 손은 딜라 때는 결혼을 설준 것도 뭐 토그를 했으면 좀 되게 수월로 와
써보셨어
어디 어째서 되게 수월해 제가 뒤뒤 그 레딜라 레 첨부 등 춘주망고 열었어 제가 단도 고물르도 레디 레 첨부 말 춘주지기 장 남이기 되고 되게 용국이 유나 만주기 내 친구 들었다 임바로 와서 빼시기 열어서 고물르도 레 소주고 레 마상جو 춘주지가 레 남이 되고 용국이 유나 만주기 딸 제조기 레도 용어 좀 상화로 와 시 삼바지 와도 상화로 첨부로 와 일단 남이 되고 열었어 리베스티달 시기 열어서
아니 지단데 somebody 매너야 아니 되고 사이어래
어디래
내가 될라라
소주고 레
삼바 매너야
열
그래
오간지 심지 소제베 네바 열어 네바 키워라 시대 삼바 좋아도 참아다 되고 동의 녀손 끼워라 녀월 끼워라 어디서 세브스 그다 배시고야 균제디 세브송다 안다 고
그래 저래서
레기 소주 레 춘주데 리지기 레 남이 되부데 용국이 연나 나도 남이 소주 레 첨부 제다로와 그다 남이 제부 첨부 여고 배시고 그래서
then in the karmas that are unknown to us the karmas for which we are responsible that we don't recall there are in addition the non-virtuous karmas that though there are in karmas 4 features that when complete ensure that the consequence is the greatest the consequence takes the greatest form that it could possibly by virtue of the 4 features being complete, that is the basis and the intention and the execution and the completion. When all 4 of these features of an action are complete entirely, then the consequence is of the gravest form. But it happens too that there are karmas for which we are responsible that are not complete in all 4 respects. And they haven't got to be complete in all 4 respects. Intention may be absent, yet nevertheless a consequence will ensue. It might be easier to illustrate this from the perspective of a virtuous karma accumulated in such a way. And there's an account of during the time of the Buddha Shakyamuni, the principal disciple to the Buddha Bhagavan, Madhgalyayana, visited the elderly lay disciple who would who intended to become ordained. And the Buddha Bhagavan sent Madhyayana to see this lay householder, this aged lay householder, to evaluate whether they had the merit necessary to become a renunciant. And Madhyayana evaluated the lay householder and concluded that and told the lay householder, your merit is insufficient, and it won't do to be ordained now. And having learned of this, the Buddha Bhagavan followed up on Madhyayana's visit and said, Madhyayana hasn't achieved yet complete clairvoyance and doesn't see all that is to be seen in your history. And I see clearly that in your past, during heavy rains, when water accumulated and then began to flow around a stupa, you had taken rebirth as an ant at that time and fell upon a leaf that floated around the stupa. And this karma is sufficient. And so in any karma, the karma may be of the greatest form, an average form, or a lesser form. In the case of Arya Nagarjuna, is of a karma of the most minuscule residue, and yet that minuscule residue of karma for Arya Nagarjuna would ripen as it did in the fully ripened result that it did. Now, when all of the four features of an action make for a complete action, then in the case of taking life, this ensures that one will be born, in this case, in hell. But all four features haven't got to be present, and the results may vary as a result. But consider most importantly that when for Arya Nagarjuna's remaining very minuscule karma, the consequence that he experienced, reason accordingly in each of our own cases, all the consequences that yet lie in store for us. Are there others? Are there others, or we close with prayer?
And there are multiple reasons why I'm struggling with the story, but I will say this. The way the story was told, it wasn't that he was killed with the blade of grass. He actually exposed the karmic vulnerability for someone else to kill him with the blade of grass, right? And so in that way, how was that skillful? It may have cleared his karma, but it created a negative karma of murder for the person that wanted to murder him. And it really wasn't a fully ripened karma, because it didn't have the intention. There was no awareness, there was no discriminating mind, nor was there any celebration or confirmation or feeling of positive feeling after the murder happened. So it felt like an overkill for purifying that karma, and then it felt like offering negative karma to the prince. So I'm just struggling with the story.
Namtaride gomba luruki gomba zolso de tes lola babo mendo tata ngeba de nyema son nyema son karijine lana ta de gomba luruki sedela ani soso ani seitsu de kalop nangne 아니 바로보 미 셴바직라 아니 딕베레 삭수직 아니 테버레 그래서 아니 소소기 레 ngoman에 삭요 공부를 임베 자네 소소 ngoman에 아니 딕베레 삭요 참모데 아니 빵야라 미 셴바직라 아니 딕바 세축나 치벤 책제 다드네 아니 디마세 티 나밍기 드레부 간드레스 차그레 나밍기 드레부 아니 차면도 겸센 다티 티 아니 시 삼바 아니 조르와 타르투 티 시가 디 상면도 대장 나밍기 드레부 간드레스 차요
저랑 당보들은 저랑 고아 내기 고아 때에서 참아서 가고 좋은 식습니다.
I'm gratified to hear the beginnings of the coherence of karmic causality in your understanding.
아니 이거 들라 오블루주 남다를 이 맛이 봤지. 아니 저랑 오블루주 남다 지당 단당 가지고 취지 남다 망보되는 취지지만 시에요 말와서 제가 저랑 디네 다들 남다들 막 14로 나야 법정 제약에
And furthermore, in this account from the liberation story of Arya Nagarjuna, we have only taken a small section of it and presented it here. Now begins your moment for a deeper investigation of that liberation story of Arya Nagarjuna.
저랑 게 남미기 제부들 다들 단데 들었음바들 남미기 제부 말하라 이 저랑 빼자고 요레스 아스나 다 아주 남미기 제부들라 아주 단다 남미기 제부 발빠지나 대시 이야기 남미기 제부들라 이 삼바 조와 타두시 창소나 남미기 제부 용어를 계속 끼어버렸어 내가 시에 요레스 다 단다 가서 공부를 주기 거기 남미기 제부 치 마상에서 남미기 제부 레베 마르베스 저거 첨부레스 저거 드링큐 좋아당에 내점 디나믹 되고 차줘야 요 말에 그 좋아마다는 아니 디나믹 되고 차야 돼 이렇게 좀 말했어 아고 데부 시나는 가리나를 연구를 해서 봐 그래서 콘도 스테부 셴바 용화도 규정이 되고는 수두고 매와 있다 남이 되고는 링따지 샤샤요 그래서
지선제 아니 규통기 제보 아니 매 그래서 마인상 내내
규통기 되고 시요로 단데 제바주도 용화주도 요로 남이 되고 시요로 다 콘도 숨나라 daksa 요말
그래요
고치기 집에 내려와 다 메디 좀 다디 가와셔선 다 데부 시마도 잠깐 잠메디 남이 되고 슬람 샤샤요 네 저거 더 그래서
And third, to point out that this event is not the fully ripened result is reasonable. This is reasonable and consistent with the textual authority that specifies that when the basis, the intention, the execution and the confirmation are all present, then there is a fully ripened result, definite, and in the case of taking life, that is birth in hell. And this is the textual support. Now, in the case of Nagarjuna and this particular event, whether it is the fully ripened result or not is cause for considerable debate. And how I respond to your question, one way or the other, doesn't resolve the matter. What remains outstanding is this consideration of four kinds of results, there being the fully ripened result and the result consistent with the cause in experience and the result consistent with the cause in action and the environmental result. Apparently, this event does not fall into any of the latter three, the result consistent with the cause in experience or the result consistent with the cause in action or the environmental result, which leaves it unresolved, but standing in the category of fully ripened result.
근데 되니만 결랑 저거 대가라 못이 다들 먼저 저거 망불래 그래. 아니 결랑 게 맛이 14돈 삼로 땅. 아니 남이 레기 남이의 제부터 계속올다 레기 동반이 당 레제기 남샤니부티 하루 딱이나 레제기 남샤 타와 동반이들라고 그랬어. 그래서 동반이 레제기 남샤디 그 하장 참으랬어. 산지 코넥 주의나 아주 단단 감상 내래 디 말했으는 것도 다 줘야 돼. 왕자 감정을 시제게 당겨 말에 왕자 이거 말했어. 그래서 단단 감정 저거 채우래 손었어. 내샤 손었어.
Now you continue to investigate in this story of karmic causality. We haven't even yet turned the first page in it, and so you continue to follow up, and this will produce more questions, and you continue to give this careful thought because between emptiness and karmic causality, in their difficulty, karmic causality is far more difficult to fathom, far more subtle than emptiness that is comparatively coarse and gross. The Buddha Bhagavan alone fathoms karmic causality. For us to say it is this way and not that way, we haven't got the authority or the ability to definitively say very clearly, but there is cause for debate and we ought to debate it. Emptiness is the class of phenomena that is partly obscure. Reason exposes emptiness. Karmic causality is in the category of the extremely obscure phenomena. There's no exposing of the workings of karmic causality apart from reliance upon authoritative scripture. And we will conclude here and close with the final recitations, and as we do, then the ripening of karmas through the application of antidote powers and the elimination of any residual latencies of non-virtuous karmas in our minds, that they be thoroughly expiated and that all virtues be preserved and increased. To this end, we dedicate our closing prayers. le tru janju lam je rembe gyang tade nam ye ye la pe de jin jave de ba ren de gyang ge ji dan zan je be dun yin go ji jin ge gen se je me dan me gun Sera kundu yawe ma ba ye namda lamda je wa ge quand c'était moi, je la, je j'aime pour la, pas de tout est nangue dans d'autres jésus. From my two collections, vast as space that I have amassed, from working with effort at this practice for a great length of time, may I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose mind's wisdom eye is blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your loving compassion for all my lives, Mantra Shri. May I find the best of the paths of the complete teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by practicing. Using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings with the points of the path as I have discerned them. May I uphold Buddha's teachings for a very long time. With my heart going out with great compassion, in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread or once spread have declined, may I offer this treasure of happiness to aid all sentient beings. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted bounteous peace, and the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time, by following the complete graduated path to enlightenment and the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. May all human and non-human beings that eliminate adversity and make things conducive for practicing the excellent paths never be parted in any of their lives from the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtuous practices, may he always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may oceans of prosperity spread everywhere.
Dagi chini sabe ge wandi tendan ro gunya gam tendan Kebara jezun lo san raba yi tembe nyimbo rindu se che cho Kare rawe korwe shingande pendan dewa malu Tere sewa tenze gyaso yi Shabe sidi maradu tengerechi Jambe bawo jido kimba dang Kudu zambu deyan deshi Teta kunje jesu talo je Gyawa teta tamje radu Jesu shebe gyawa tamje ge Owa kanla chodo mabade Dagi gewe zawa digu gyang Sambo chuje rado ngoverge Jancho sencho rimbo che Maje bana gegirche Gewa nyamba meba yang Kone konde ewa ishu I dedicate whatever virtues I have ever collected for the benefit of the teachings and of sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa the Shine forever. In the land encircled by snowy mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful hindrance and counsel, please remain until cyclic existence is ended. Just as the brave Manchu Sri and Samanthabhadra too realize things as they are, also I dedicate all of these merits in the best way, that I may follow their perfect example. I dedicate all these roots of virtue with the dedication praised as the best by the victorious thus gone ones of the three times, so that I might perform the noble bodhisattva's deeds. May the supreme jewel of Bodhisattva that is not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. Namshi Tamu Dilla Bangalu de Pechu, Sesam Chewa, the Pemasi Gawachu, Nolan Hachimba,
Thank you, everybody, and that even in the cold weather, you came with the intention to endure hardship for the sake of the Dharma. I'm gratified and appreciative, and make aspirational prayers in accordance with this. Yeah. Oh, my obvious, vicious.